Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Moscow Mitch Monday. We are your Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee coming at you live. We are, of course, the all-volunteer campaign to hold Mitch McConnell accountable for how his horrible agenda impacts Kentucky. It's a really exciting time. We now have we've got our nominee. The primary is finished. Thank God that's behind us. It was a very exciting primary. We had a lot of folks involved. We had many candidates, but at the end, it was a very, very nail-biting finish between Amy McGrath and Representative Charles Booker, ultimately with, of course, Amy McGrath just pulling it out by not very many votes. Really showed that democracy is alive and well and functioning because it was not a preordained winner. It was, in fact, a very, very hard fought primary. So yay, democracy. We had a democracy. We had an amazing pandemic vote that turned out incredibly well, despite a lot of concerns that were coming our way. So yeah, here we are. It's really an exciting time for the general election. This is our first We Know the Winner general election live stream, Moscow Mitch Monday, and I am Aaron Viles. I'm streaming to you from Childsburg, Lexington, and as we do every Moscow Mitch Monday, we start by asking, what's your protest sign say today? And mine says, what does it say? It says, Mitch doesn't cares, all capital cares about us. And I'll get to that reference later, because Nate seems confused. But let's go to Nate. Nate, who are you? Where are you coming from? And what's your sign say?
Hey, it's this Nate Orshan coming to you from Frankfort, Kentucky. And today my sign says pretty much what it's been saying every week. And, you know, probably from here to eternity is, hey, Mitch, Black Lives Matter.
Awesome. And then next up, we've got Denise.
Hey everybody, it's me, Denise Gray, and I'm coming to you from the north side of Lexington, Kentucky. And my protest sign says it's time to unite, and then it has hashtag justice for Brianna.
That's awesome. Awesome. So, hey, folks, we have a really, really exciting show today. You might have noticed we had some interesting new video elements. So we now are partnering with Couchfire Media to make our live stream look a little cooler, a little more professional. We'll say professional, although, you know, no one's getting paid yet. So it's still an all volunteer effort. But what we hope it helps us, you know, get the information across in a way that's going to be compelling, in a way that's powerful, helps you to then share the information that we're sharing so that we can get it out there into the world to hold Mitch accountable. So today what we've got, we're going to do Mitch in the News, of course. We're then going to bring on Kit, who's going to have the Mitch Never Lets Us Down and Letting Us Down essay. We love Kit's essays. Then we're going to have Doug showing up to follow Mitch's money, looking at some of Mitch and Elaine's donations, personal political donations. And then super exciting, we've got Aftyn Behn, who is the senior regional organizer for Indivisible. So we're going to hear about Indivisible's work, specifically in her states, which are Kentucky, of course, and then also Tennessee, because apparently she likes Tennessee. I don't know why she wastes her time there. They seem like crazy people. But, you know, we've got a really exciting show. And then to jump into it, though, right now, what we're going to talk about is what's going on in the news. What I wanted to share with folks about, though, is that we're in a rough spot, right? So we have got coronavirus happening If you look around the country, you've got states that shut down, that reopened, shutting back down. We're seeing, Texas and Florida have huge spikes. We've got, the stories of, ER rooms just over capacity, and it doesn't look good, right? So here in Kentucky, we have a complete economic crisis. The numbers I've seen is that we've now topped 1 million people who are out of work. People who in Kentucky have applied for unemployment, who, thanks to federal leadership, are getting that additional $600 a week because the Kentucky state unemployment insurance is not that generous, right? So this was part of that CARES Act to respond to the coronavirus economic downturn, and that runs out. So the end of July, we are now in July. We had our Independence Day. We at the end of July, that $600 a week, additional federal support, that runs out. And what I am incredibly concerned with, looking around the country, that 1 million people out of work, they're not going to magically be back at the job on August 1. Right. So we are trying to do some reopening. Lots and lots of, restaurants are at, just kind of skeleton crews. They don't have capacity. They don't need more servers because no one's coming to the restaurants because it's not really safe to go to restaurants, and they can't even be opened at 100% capacity right now. So there's a lot of different parts of our economy that are not going to be back 100% at the end of July. And at this point, what we're very concerned about is that Mitch is saying there will not be an additional unemployment benefit. That when this thing ends in July, the end of July, that's it. There will not be anything else. Okay, so that sounds a little bit hard-hearted, because not just those the million people out of work, we're also seeing, this is a story that came from, or information that came from the Kentucky State Data Center at the University of Louisville, that as of June 2nd, 27% or 546,000 Kentucky households have either missed last month's rent or mortgage payment, or have very little confidence in their ability to pay in July. So that makes Kentucky the 10th highest housing insecure state in the union. 27% of folks concerned they're not going to be able to make rent or pay their mortgage, right? And that should be a terrifying statistic for anyone, right? And I think that shows that we need to see more federal engagement. Again, this is not a snap your fingers and the economy is going to be back roaring, no matter what Trump says. This is going. If you look at what's happening in Texas and in Florida, that's the warning sign, right? So if you rush back into it, then you're gonna just have to close things down again because the virus is going to didn't go away. We're not even in we haven't even gotten a real dip yet. It's been more of a plateau. So when people go back to work, when people go back out into, of course, bars, they're gonna spread this. It's gonna take off again. They're gonna have to contract things if we aren't incredibly careful, and then people are gonna be hurting again if they were able to come back to work. So that, for me, that's just very terrifying. And the fact that we've got Mitch McConnell out there basically saying, no more support is
actually, Aaron, he is now coming out to say something different. He is now saying that for those who make $40,000 or less, those in the hospitality area, he's just now saying this today at his events, I guess, I don't know where he is in Kentucky today, but he's saying that now Mitch is open to another stimulus check for Americans. And for those, he says, for the most need. I guess it is an election year, so he's changing his tune as we go along.
Well, that's good to hear, because, that's what's the point of having the most powerful, politician in Washington, D.C. if he's not actually standing up for people. So, look, I'm going to give Mitch credit when he's due credit. The man wears a mask. It's a very low bar at this point, but yes, he wears a mask, so I'm going to give him credit for that. And if he's actually saying they're going to have additional relief offered from the federal government, I'll give him credit for that. But I'll tell you what I'm not going to give him credit for, Nate, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. He is right now touring the state, right? So the Senate is out of session. They went out of session. They're not going to be back until the 20th of July. So whatever he says, Denise, he's not going to have an actual chance to do anything in terms of legislation until they're back in DC on the 20th of July. But he's touring the state, touting how important the CARES Act has been for our recovery, for that kind of lifeline that is presented. But I don't know, anyone remember what he was doing when the CARES Act was being negotiated? Does anyone think that is a legitimate claim that he's a huge champion of the CARES Act? I don't know, folks. Yeah, Nate, what did you think about that? Harkening back, what was he doing when the CARES Act was negotiated?
Well, first of all, I mean, he was, there was that fateful weekend. We keep bringing it up, but I think every time that we talk about it, there's someone new listening, so they may not have heard the story about how Mitch McConnell, while the Senate and the House were talking about the initial CARES Act, and there was this long weekend coming up, instead of staying in Washington and having them sort of continue to do this critical work, he came back home to Louisville. Why? So he could basically glad hand and celebrate the next promotion of his protege, Justin Walker, who's this kind of arch conservative, the kind of person that the Heritage Foundation just loves to get into the bench because they know that they're going to be a reliable vote for years and years and years for legislation, or not for legislation, but a reliable judge that doesn't care about human rights, but cares about corporations over people, all the terrible things that we don't want in government, But that's what Mitch McConnell was doing, and as far as his Johnny Come Lately act with he's suddenly all about it, I hear that and I think, here's a guy who's seen his polls and they're probably not very good. And he was hoping to sort of ride on Trump's coattails, but Trump's polls are starting to really look terrible as well. So he doesn't have that anymore. So he's maybe going to have to try to do something for Kentuckians to get reelected. But it's transparent, and nobody should believe that, he's turned over a new leaf or become, sort of touchy-feely and caring about the rest of us, because it's not true.
And I'm hoping that people see through his transparent acts and sees to the heart of what he's been doing, or the lack of what he's been doing for 35 years. I'm hoping that people actually look at the history and see how we have not grown as a state. We've actually been going backwards, health-wise, economy-wise, growth. Look at Eastern Kentucky. So, we have a whole lot of growth to do, and hopefully we'll get a new leadership for the state of Kentucky in November.
Absolutely. The hypocrisy of Mitch McConnell touring the state, touting the support the CARES Act is providing for food shelter, for shelters, for food banks, for hospitals, is outrageous, right? So this is the guy that when they were negotiating the CARES Act, when he could take the time away from celebrating his judges, he was actually pushing for this massive, $1 trillion corporate slush fund with no strings attached. He didn't want any oversight of that money and how it got spent. It was the Democrats in the House that forced some level of oversight and accountability to that money and how it was spent, right? The other piece that he had no interest in was the $600 a week. So the thing to make people whole, so that they, through no fault of their own, it's not because they were lazy, like the Republicans like to just, tell everyone they're lazy, that's why you don't have a job. No, these people who couldn't work because the economy was, ground to a halt because of the coronavirus. So these people were made whole, and it was a decent system. It was, generous in the sense that it got most people to where they would have been maybe a little bit before if you were, one of the many jobs that were, many minimum wage jobs, right? So, the reality of this is, this was all despite Mitch's best efforts. So that he is now sharing with people that he has done this amazing thing for our Commonwealth by negotiating this deal. None of this came from him. None of the things we actually want out of, this kind of federal support is due to Mitch McConnell. Right. So meanwhile, our economy is, in a dire situation. We've got $1 billion shortfall that Governor Beshear is warning about in our budget. If we have over $1 billion budgetary shortfall, that means we're going to see cuts of 16 to 29% from the state budget. And of course, what's Mitch's response to that? What should we do about this?
Go
Let them
bankrupt.
go.
Just go bankrupt.
Go bankrupt has
Just
been
go.
his motto for the past couple of months, So
Yeah.
is that
So,
what he wants for the state of Kentucky, to go bankrupt? I mean,
well,
if that's what he
that was-
said, and when people say something, when they say something about themselves, you best believe them.
absolutely. All right. So, what I think is really interesting here, though, is his first ad, the campaign cycle, when Andy was incredibly popular and everyone was very excited to see Governor Beshear's leadership. There was Mitch, the bipartisan leader, showing everyone how he and Andy work together. As he's telling Kentucky to go bankrupt. I'm not really sure how those two things line up, but he's got a new ad now. So he has got a new ad. It's called "Defeat the Mob," and I think we're going to be able to play it for you. So yeah, let's go ahead and watch it, and then on the other side, we'll talk a little bit about it.
It is simply unbelievable. Now, the mobs have come for our founders and our heroes: Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, General Grant, who brought the Civil War to an end, freeing the slaves, the World War II memorial. Governors and mayors stood down and watched criminals spray paint churches, topple statues, and harass police. Seattle's mayor lets gangs ban police from several square blocks. People have been killed.
All right, Mitch, the culture warrior. He is coming after these crazy protesters who are taking down all the different statues of our founding fathers. The most, I don't know. All right, so does this ad ring true to anyone? Does anyone feel like, if you're in Kentucky and you've been, seeing the protests in Louisville or the incredibly peaceful protests in Lexington, does anyone see this and go, oh yeah, that's what people are going through here in Kentucky?
So this ad right here, to me, is ringing a whole bunch of, tearing down the monuments or history, whoever's history this is. It's just, to me, it's a sign of bigotry and bringing up what's the worst in the United States right now. That ad is everything that we claim that we're not. If Mitch McConnell is standing up for all Kentuckians, that ad right there that I just saw is a farce. And I had not seen that until now, so I'm extremely upset right now. Nate, do you want to add anything to this? I'm like in awe.
How's the right word? No, actually, well, I mean, I don't want to be spoiler alert, but I think that my spouse Kit is going to be talking about the ad in a few minutes, so I don't want to, steal any thunder or anything. But yeah, no, it's outrageous. It's outrageous, and it's not Kentucky, and it's almost like a dog whistle, but for whom? And how is it going to help them? I don't know. It seems desperate, and it's bad.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a dog whistle for the lowest common denominator. That's what that ad is for. And is that the base that he's seeking? Is that the Kentucky that he's seeking? And that makes me kind of concerned, because Kentuckians are better than that. And for him to go to the lowest low that you can possibly go, that is just a disgrace. And it's un-Kentuckian, if that's such a word. That is not who we are, and that's not who we claim to be. So I'm very disappointed if there's such a thing I could be with Mitch McConnell. I'm extremely disappointed.
Well, he thinks it's going to be a winning argument for him, right? And just to remember, this is how Mitch runs, right? So he runs on, I bring things to the state. He does his check delivery tour every 6 years. He'll come around to every, county that he can claim he's supported through some federal project. So now he's using the CARES Act with an incredible amount of hypocrisy to show his support for the state. And then, he wants to, play the kind of attack ad stuff as much as possible. This ad, I don't know. It's like, can't really attack Amy on this issue, right? It doesn't make any sense. But he is going to try to nationalize the race. So it's like, hey, I'm the guy that brings you checks. And then remember, those national Democrats are horrible, right? So if he can scare, his Fox News viewing supporters with, the idea of Antifa tearing down statues that you passionately love. I think he's going to do that. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't ring true. Unfortunately, the Louisville protests have been deadly, but it's been the protesters themselves and the small business owners who've paid that tragic price. There hasn't been widespread rioting or looting. The Lexington protests have been about as kumbaya as you can get, by and large. They've made their case, and they've done it in a very peaceful way. So the idea that there are hordes of rioting looters that are going to take down statues everywhere, just it can't mesh up with the reality that we're seeing here in Kentucky.
And from back when I ran for office, I always bring it to this. They made a local, which was a state race, a local issue. They stated that I was too liberal for Kentucky. However, in my race, I was the only person that was born and raised in Kentucky. So typically, and they aligned me with Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton, two great ladies whom I've never in life met, nor did they donate to my campaign. So typically is what they do. And I'm not one for political parties. I'm for standing with someone who is right. Typically what the Republican Party does is to align a local race or a local issue with a national issue that is not in alignment with what we stand for. And typically we have a lot of people who do believe that the national issue is taking place here, even though it might just be in Washington, D.C. So.
Absolutely. So, hey, one quick thing before we get to Kit, I want to do our call to action. So, as you know, what's a demonstration unless you're demanding some action? What we want to see is, we want to see Mitch stand up, right? So he's doing a really good job of claiming credit for the CARES Act, but that thing expires. The support for people expires the end of July. He's out touring the state for the next 2 weeks. We need to put the pressure on him to get back to DC and do the right thing and stand up for the members of our, parts of our economy that aren't not doing well. These 500,000 people who are insecure in their housing. In case you didn't hear that, we have about over 500,000 people in Kentucky who've missed last month's rent payment or mortgage payment, or don't have confidence in their ability to pay in July. People need help. Mitch needs to give it to him. Go to either his website, just go to his Facebook page, whatever post he has claiming credit for supporting the state through the CARES Act. Put a post in there. Let them know that, people are still hurting. Over 500,000 people are insecure in their housing right now in Kentucky. You need to do something to help them out. You need to get back to DC and renew that unemployment federal benefit of that $600 a week until people don't need it. Some people don't need it. They're going back to work. That's great. But a lot of our economy is not going to jump right back to speed at July 31st. So we definitely need that action. So please do it. It's Moscow Mitch Monday. It's a protest. Use the hashtag Moscow Mitch. Put it in his Facebook comments and demand something from Mitch McConnell. So, but yeah, next thing up is we've got Kit. We're going to hear another fiery essay about how Mitch never lets us down and letting us down.
Because he never lets us down and letting us down. And before I even start, Aaron, I got to tell you, you're rocking the Stephen King look today. And I think it's really fitting given that ad we just listened to. Just saying. And as a Mainer, I have to say it's a plus.
Thank you very much, Kit. Yeah, if I could ever get a haircut, maybe I would. But yeah, I had to bust out the glasses.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit of a throwback look for everybody.
Yeah, it works. So it works. Before I get going, I just want to say, I have a tendency to really enjoy most things that I do. I kind of think if I don't enjoy them, I find a way to enjoy them, and I like to think of it as my superpower. And I've been writing these essays. I think I've done 4 or 5 of them now over the last couple months, and I've been flummoxed at one point, frustrated. If I may quote my home state Senator, Republican Susan Collins from Maine, I found myself concerned, which Denise, you used the word concerned earlier, and I was like, uh-huh. But you know what? This time I'm angry. I'm really angry. I'm angry by that ad. I've watched this Mitch McConnell ad defeat the mob a number of times now. And it starts with him saying, "It is simply unbelievable." And that's actually appropriate, right? This ad is simply unbelievable. So a few weeks back, I commented on a McConnell ad that features a picture of him with Kentucky's popular Democratic governor, Andy Beshear. It was an odd juxtaposition of putting the self-proclaimed Grim Reaper next to a governor who was appealing to our compassion for one another. This particular ad is much more in keeping with Mr. McConnell's actual style. It's bitter, divisive, alarmist, misleading. It stokes anger. It's propagandistic and makes a direct play to people's fears. It is tantamount to a dog whistle, a call to action against the far left mob that wants to a call to action, and I put this in quotations, actually, he said this on his website, the far left mob that wants to tear down our founding fathers and defund the police, as he phrases it on his donation page, which was actually at the site defeatthemob.com. So this is more than just an ad, it is an actual site. What's up with his point that a statue of Vladimir Lenin still stands? Is he calling the entire political left communist? Is he implying that we must defeat these unruly mobsters or we'll end up living in a communistic country? For that matter, do we even really know who is destroying these statues? Do we know that it's mobsters from the left, as he would have us believe? Did the far left mob destroy the statue of Frederick Douglass in Rochester, New York last weekend? Or what about the myriad of times that Emmett Till's memorial has been knocked down? The ad doesn't even focus on Kentucky, the state in which he is the representative, the senator. Why is he talking about Seattle in an ad to Kentucky? If he's going to talk about the whole country, how about calling out the threatening armed mob protesting the Democratic governor's COVID policies at the Michigan Capitol recently? Or maybe the counter protesters we've seen harassing peaceful protesters while carrying military-grade weaponry. How about them? Here in Kentucky, I live in Frankfort. We have had far-right protest after far-right protest up here at the Capitol. I didn't hear his concern then. Why didn't he also mention that mob that hanged Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear in effigy and stormed up the steps to his house? Surely an act of implied violence against a living leader is more pressing than a statue falling. Good sir, do you really think that Kentuckians are that gullible? It calls to mind the movie Up. Remember that kids movie Up that wasn't really a kids movie and we all ended up in tears afterwards? When a pack of dogs would hear the word squirrel, it didn't matter what they were doing because squirrel, and off they go, distraction. This is a distraction, Kentucky. While coronavirus continues to race through our country with around 127 to 130,000 dead, including 585 Kentuckians, Mitch wants us to worry about statues. While unemployment is still high and the threat of again closing down the state for COVID is looming over us, Mitch wants us to worry about statues. While our president refuses to respond to Republican President Vladimir Putin's action, putting a bounty on the heads of our service members, Mitch wants us to worry about statues. While, to our great shame, Europe, Canada, and Mexico have closed their borders to Americans to prevent the spread of coronavirus, Mitch wants us to worry about statues. While we are losing members of the greatest generation at an alarming rate to COVID-19, and many of these are actual Antifa, the heroes of World War II who fought fascists, who are living monuments of our nation stepping in to aid in the fight against Hitler's army, Mitch wants us to worry about statues. Think about that. He's worried about statues while our greatest generation dies. We are not fooled, Senator. We are not gullible. We are focused. We are determined. We are engaged, and we will win. And I just wanted to add a side note, a personal side note. The ad says that, quote, the mobs have come for our heroes. Senator McConnell, my heroes are the living, breathing protesters, risking abuse and retaliation, who are on the streets demanding the change of a system that only serves the few. Your ad endangers them. You, sir, are endangering them. I will remember in November, and I call on the rest of Kentucky to do the same. Love, Kit. Thank you for having me, folks.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kit. As always, Kit, bringing the heat, but also bringing the light, bringing the insight. So if you want to hear or read, I love hearing Kit's essay. but then I also want to read it again because there are some really amazing points layered in there. Go to our Medium account and you can find all of Kit's essays. They're fantastic. You can also find all of Doug's research heavy essays. So now we're going to go ahead right into Doug's Following Mitch's Money. This is, of course, our standing effort to expose where Mitch's corruption lies, his campaign contributions, and how that translates into policy. And with that, we'll bring in Doug Price.
Thanks, Aaron, Denise, and Nate. Happy to be here to provide another segment of Following Mitch's Money. I have on my DuPont hat. Several years ago, I delivered explosives. That was an interesting job. Why this hat? I have some explosive information. This evening, I'm taking a look at Mitch and his donations to others, along with donations from family members to Mitch and connected Mitch PACs and or committees. All the monetary figures come from Open Secrets, the Center for Responsive Politics. I want to say something real quick, though. I think I'd rather go before Kit because she is an awesome person to have to follow. Over the years, I've heard that Mitch is rich, so I investigated, and according to Open Secrets, he's now the 7th or 8th richest senator in the Senate. A big chunk of his net worth came about due to an inheritance from his wife's father, James Chow, estimated to be $25 million. His net worth is estimated to be between $34 to $55 million. He and his wife own a house in Louisville and a 3,000 square foot home in Washington, D.C., an old historic home built in 1890. He has no debts. Here's some new information on Mitch. He has been pretty stingy with his wallet when it comes to using his personal money to donate to fellow politicians. My research details his donations beginning in 1999 to his last donation in December of 2013. From the smallest amount of $400 to the largest amount of $10,000, he has contributed a total of $30,400. His largest contribution in June of 2013 was $10,000 to the Republican Party of Kentucky. Senator Rand Paul has received $10,400. Others benefited by his largesse have been David Vitter, Alice Ford Kerr, George W. Bush, plus Jeff Sessions and Johnny Isaacson. If you're wondering if the David Vitter is the David Vitter from Louisiana, then you would be correct. If you haven't heard of him, then Google him. I feel certain he has directed many other contributions from PACs that he either controls or has strong input in how the funds are spent. Based on my research, it appears that his wife, Elaine Chow, is much easier with her pocketbook than Mitch, and she has contributed over $177,000 from 1989 to 2020. The largest donors have been the Republican Party of Kentucky, $60,000, the Republican National Committee, $50,500, the Protective Life Corp PAC, more on this one later, and politicians named Mitch, $11,000, Rand Paul, $10,400, George W. Bush, $6,000. Elaine was Bush's Secretary of Labor. Others include the Republican parties of several other states, Bob Packwood, Mel Martinez, Frank Murkowski, Mitt Romney, David Ritter, and a huge, I mean really big, $250 donation to the Value in Electing Women PAC. Who is the Protective Life Corporation? Based in Birmingham and owned by a Japanese firm called Daiichi. As of 2016, Mrs. Chow was on the board of directors of PLC, but is no longer on the board. The current president of PLC has given hundreds of dollars to the PLC PAC. During the 2020 election cycle, this PAC has given $45,000 to Republicans, with the largest contribution going to Jeff Sessions, $10,000. Wonder what Trump thinks about that. Mitch's father-in-law, James S.C. Chow, is also a prolific giver to Republicans. $70,000 to the Republican Party of Kentucky, $33,000 to the National Republican Committee, $27,000 to the National Republican Senatorial Committee, $5,200 to Mitt Romney, $15,200 to Mitch, and $2,000 to David Vitter. Must be a family thing. $5,000 to the Bluegrass Committee, $3,000 to George W. Bush. And there is another chow, James Y.H., who is from Texas, making contributions too. $5,600 to Mitch, $2,700 to Jamie Comer, and $7,800 to the National Senatorial Senate Committee. I was unable to determine any connection other than the last name. Another search indicates that people with the last name of Chow have contributed $230,000 to the Republican Party. In the future, following Mitch's money, I will discuss who controls the Kentucky Republican Party of Kentucky. Another family connection is Gordon Harto-Gensis. He is married to Elaine Chow's sister and is the 16th director of the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. Quoting from the AFL-CIO's Corporate News publication, he was confirmed by the Senate by a vote of 72 to 27. There is concern about nepotism due to his family relationships and his apparent lack of experience in the area of pensions. Wikipedia refers to him as a multimillionaire, so I guess that gives him pretty good status. During the future following Mitch's money, I may delve into his contributions and his relation to other Republicans. Bottom line, it is very interesting to follow the intricacies of money and power. A teaser, Mr. Harto-Gensis has given $50,000 to the Republican Party of Kentucky, $7,600 to Mitch, $2,000 to David Vitter, who else, and $5,000 to the Bluegrass Committee, which is based in Washington, where there is no bluegrass unless on the bottom of Mitch's shoes. This committee has given $210,000 to Republican House/Senate candidates in the 2020 election cycle. As noted earlier, Mitch has contributed only from 1989 to mid-2020 to benefit himself. He has raised over $98 million. Again, all of this points back to what Mitch has stated on many occasions. The key to winning in politics is money, money, money. Back to you, Aaron, Denise, and Nate.
Thanks so much, Doug. So the bigger issue here is why, if Mitch has been our senator, so powerful for 35 years, why does Doug still have such bad internet, right? So our state clearly needs to bring high-speed internet to Cynthiana. I think what I heard there was inspiring and enlightening. But what I do know is you'll be able to find this essay on our Medium account. We'll get it up shortly. And also, as a one-time Louisiana voter, voted against David Vitter every opportunity I had. Anyone that was trying to extend his political career is not a friend of mine. That guy was horrible. Oh my, so glad he's out of politics. All right, well, Doug, thank you so much for following Mitch's money for us. Look to the Medium account later for that full essay. Thanks for doing the research. And then what we want to do now is bring in our special guest. So we have with us Aftyn Behn, who is with Indivisible. Very exciting. Welcome, Aftyn. What does your sign say tonight?
The happy retirement, Mitch McConnell, in honor and homage to your group. That's what my sign says.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, so yeah, you are in Tennessee. Is that correct? You're coming to us from Tennessee?
That's right, Nashville. Mm-hmm.
Nashville. Awesome. So yeah, talk about having the economic impacts of coronavirus, right? All the live music venues there in Nashville just absolutely struggling. I hear the Ryman is having a really hard time right now.
Yeah, and unlike Bashir, we have a Republican governor who refuses to believe in science. So when he said that Kentuckians cannot cross the state line, that means I can't go to Kentucky And, I hope to see all of you in person after quarantine is over, because for a while that is not going to be the case.
Yeah, there were a lot of jokes about people going to Tennessee from Kentucky. The Andy Bashir memes was exploded with people trashing Tennessee. But hey, so tell us a little bit about Indivisible. What's this organization all about? I know we know something about it because we're affiliated with you guys now, but tell us a little bit of the backstory. What's it come from? What's it do?
Sure. So Indivisible started post-Trump by our co-founders who were working in Congress at the time. They were working in Congress during the Tea Party era. And so they were fielding calls from all over the country from people really upset and kind of pushing the narrative in their home districts. So they wrote a Google document. And within a few weeks, it had millions of downloads, and all of these groups started popping up all over the country in each congressional district across the states. And within a few months, we had over 6,000 Indivisible groups. And these were organic, locally grown grassroots groups who were pushing the narrative and fighting back some of the most diabolical elected officials in the country. And so since then, we've been working to hold Trump accountable, as well as defeat some of the most diabolical senators in Congress at the moment, which includes yours truly, Mitch McConnell.
Awesome. So tell me, what's that plan look like? So I've heard this thing, the Payback Project. Tell us a little bit about the Payback Project.
Sure. So Indivisible has some pretty ambitious goals in the realm of electoral work for 2020. Our goals on the larger picture to win the House, to take back the Senate. To win the White House, to take back the Senate, and to keep the House. And our goal is to do that through 20 million direct voter contacts across the country, through the work that we'll be supporting groups like yours with, as well as additional folks in our movement. So we're looking to make 20 million voter contacts, but a piece of that campaign is through something called the Payback Project. And it was an effort originally started a few months ago, but it's an effort to package the Senate elections in a way that allows you to identify which senators are the worst, and then to tailor your activism into one effort. So the Payback Project focuses on 11 races to take back the Senate, which includes Mitch McConnell, as well as Courtney Gardner in Colorado, Joni Ernst in Iowa, Lindsey Graham, the Graham Reaper in South Carolina. And so the goal is to channel a lot of the activists that we have on our email list, as well as that follow us online, into a focused effort into Kentucky to defeat Mitch McConnell, for example. And so on the ground, National Indivisible will be working with local groups in each of these payback states with a dedicated stream of resources to make sure that we are supporting the work that you're already doing, such as this wonderful offering that you have on Mondays, Moscow Mitch Monday, to do everything we can to be promoting the work that the groups are doing on the ground to defeat Mitch McConnell. Just a few things. So we've got Mitch McConnell. I'm going to drop. Oh, I guess we're online. Okay. Well, we'll post some links, but we've got a one-pager developed on Mitch McConnell, some opposition research, which is my favorite. I love getting into the nitty-gritty and the shady when it comes to Mitch McConnell, as well as a way, if you are watching this and you are out of state, if you're outside of Kentucky, to be able to participate in the Payback Project by texting voters as well as calling through. So as we gear up for our week of action, which will be at the end of July, to launch our electoral campaign, we will be making sure that that we are pushing people through this effort in order to make the most impact in Kentucky.
Great. So wait, say that number again. How many voter contacts are you shooting to do?
It's pretty lofty, and I'm trying to, it's a lingering number, but overarching with our campaign, we're looking to make 20 million direct voter contacts across the country in an effort to do this before November 3rd, 2020, which is Election Day.
Yeah, that's no joke. All right, folks, step up. So yeah, 20 million contacts is not going to happen just on its own. That is going to take a serious effort. And so that's going to be phone calls. That's going to be texting, peer-to-peer texting. What do you guys think about canvassing? Is that something you've considered at all? Or where are folks on that?
So, Indivisible is at the forefront with other progressive national groups as to what are the best ways to get out the vote. And unfortunately, canvassing is still pretty iffy, especially in the South. As a Tennessean, canvassing is just out of the question with COVID rates soaring. We're probably going to see another resurgence of COVID. We are seeing that now, but also at election day. So all of our efforts will be streamlined online, which is why we're trying to support and create processes for folks to participate all over the country. So say you're in rural and remote Alabama, well, they've got their Senate race, but a state that doesn't have a Senate race and you want to defeat Mitch McConnell, there will be channels for you to plug in to do that type of work. But it's very lofty, but that's what it's going to take to win back the Senate, keep the House, and defeat Trump in November.
Yeah, a lot of work to be done. Denise or Nate, you have a question for Aftyn?
I'll let Nate go first. I'll go last because mine is a call to action, basically. So.
All right. Well, hey, Aftyn. What I'm wondering, I heard you talking about, all the 11 senators that Indivisible's targeting, and I'd be curious about sort of how you get the local. I guess my question is, to what extent is the national group giving suggestions to local groups, like, hey, we think you guys should try this or that, or is it sort of bottom up and the groups suggest things and you're like, oh yeah, we can support that. Do you know what I mean? Like, what does that look like, the back and forth between the two?
Well, I think what's been really interesting, listening to the other groups like yourselves and other Senate states, is that what's best. You are the experts of your community. You are the experts on Mitch McConnell. You are the experts on what's going to take him out. And I think Aaron has participated on a few of these coalition calls. We have a monthly Get Rid of Mitch call for all the Indivisible groups across the country. And it's been really enlightening for activists and organizers all across the country to listen to Kentucky groups to hear what type of work is being done in order for national to uplift. I will say, in the realm of the Payback Project, we are trying at the national level to create a coherent narrative that for other folks in our movement that want to participate. So there are pre-packaged events that y'all can participate in. So for example, groups across, I think in Colorado as well as South Carolina, put on people's town halls. So folks in South Carolina called in and read testimonies as to how terrible Lindsey Graham is. And so there are opportunities to plug into the campaign if you're a local group, but for the most part, it's about national lifting up the work that all of you're doing, especially this type of event on Mondays, to build the narrative around Mitch McConnell, because it's going to be all of you that are doing this work, especially in the rural communities in Kentucky, because the narrative work is probably the most important.
Okay, and then Aftyn, what can regular citizens do to get involved in the electoral process so that we can ditch Mitch and elect Amy McGrath?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to plug in. And this is, I will say, as someone who lived through a 2018 Senate race with Phil Bredesen, and I am so sorry, Marsha Blackburn, I was on the ground to see what millions of dollars, it was the most expensive Senate race in Tennessee history. And we had a lot of outside money come in. And I think for me as a grassroots organizer, it's really important that that money is held accountable to the people on the ground that are doing the organizing. And so my goal in all of this, by, for example, creating the platform for outside Indivisible groups to talk to Kentucky groups, is to make sure that they're plugging into the work that y'all want them to be doing. And so if that's with the People's Campaign, and I know, Clark and the folks there have a great campaign to, boost turnout in Louisville, Lexington.
Yes, they do.
Yeah,
Yes.
they're amazing. If that's working with KFTC to try to register voters digitally, I mean, there's just so much work to be done, and it's important that the grassroots organizations such as y'all, such as Bluegrass Activist Alliance and Indivisible Kentucky, that the groups on the ground are the ones driving the narrative and the electoral work, because it's not going to be people in California that get rid of Mitch McConnell. It's going to be all of you. So
It's going to be us that actually
right.
do the work and then get out and vote.
That's
So
right. That's right.
mhm.
Yeah, and I think that brings up an interesting, kind of an interesting piece of our race, right? Clearly, Mitch McConnell, the Grim Reaper, everyone knows him, everyone despises him if you are, halfway progressive, and so it got a lot of attention. I think we saw that play out in the primary race, where Amy had a very good grassroots fundraising network that she'd established in her 2018 race, and when she went after Mitch, people just knew, like, oh, well, this is the person that's going after Mitch. And people, they aren't here. They aren't in Kentucky. They aren't reading our newspapers. They don't know, the kind of the whole story of our election. So a lot of people were very kind of upset by, Californians and, New Yorkers, like, funneling money into this election when, we hadn't decided ourselves. So thankfully, that's all behind us. We've made our decision. And now if you would like to help California, we can take your money. Thanks to Indivisible, we have a lovely Act Blue fundraising account. It should be shared in the comments right now. We've had a nice, kind of initial run of support. Thank you, Uncle Dave, and Uncle Don as well. But yeah, both of my uncles have now donated. So we're going to need to get a larger community to donate as well. So if you're a part of that larger community and you want to help the Mitch McConnell Retirement Committee as part of this Indivisible network, hold Mitch accountable by, retiring him, make a donation. The process of producing this, the process of, promoting it on the social media platforms, that all costs money. Other things we want to do, and I think we'll be bringing on, Sandy, or getting an update from Sandy next week, our voter registration chair. There is a lot of voters that need to be registered, that need to be ready to go for this general election. So that's going to be something that we're going to put some time and energy into as well. But it all costs time and energy, and we'd like to have the resources to do it. So please do make a donation. We'd love to have the support. But yeah, any final thoughts, Aftyn, that you want to share with folks out there?
Yeah, I think, you were talking earlier about COVID and McConnell's role and, the Senate recess and delaying, stimulus bills from being passed. And I just want to say that we're witnessing one of the greatest lootings of our time, and the top, 1% of our country are accumulating more generational wealth than ever imagined. And the Senate is directly responsible for that. In addition to being white supremacists, like they just, it's important that people understand that, the Senate, even though the Senate races are much loftier, the map to win some of these races, it's much loftier than the presidency, but it's so important because McConnell and the rest of his cronies, they are directly responsible for the harm for so many people, and the ability to live and thrive. And so I just, I'm grateful for your group. I'm grateful for this dialogue on Mondays, that it's going to continue to build the narrative around the election. And just know that I'm so appreciative of your efforts, as well as everyone across the country, because you're on the front line. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm really, really glad to have you, have your support, have Indivisible support behind the work that we're doing. It means an awful lot. Thank you for saving us from filling out lots of forms. We really appreciate, Doug really appreciates that. So he can do his research on, where Mitch's money is coming from and going to, as opposed to, where our money is coming from and going to. We will keep track of it, I promise you, people. But yeah, what I wanted to say really quickly is, we are really excited about next week's show, because we have got Chairman John Yarmuth, who is, he's the most powerful Democrat in DC from Kentucky, right? So he's the Louisville.
He's the one.
The most powerful and only. But, I mean, he's no slouch.
No, he's awesome. I love that man. Yes.
Very, very good progressive politician who fights for us every day in DC. And he's going to be on with us to share his perspective of what's going on in DC and how we need to fix what's happening back there. right? So he's a guy who's helped pass a ton of the bills that have piled up on Mitch's desk. And so this is our chance to really figure out what things could look like in Washington, D.C. If Mitch wasn't there blocking everything worthwhile from moving forward. So that's John Yarmuth. That's tomorrow, next Monday, rather. Really excited about him joining us. And then, yeah, I think that's about it. We might be able to wrap up a few minutes before 8 o'clock. Any final thoughts, Nate and Denise?
I do, of course. So, during the primary, we heard a lot of outsiders, those out of the state of Kentucky who were calling all eyes on Kentucky. And all eyes were rightly on Kentucky because we actually did it more right than wrong. There was a law, voter suppression was a major issue that they said. However, turns out Kentucky got it right, and more states are looking to the state of Kentucky for how did we do it so well. So I'm giving us a hand clap right now because we have a Republican Secretary of State, and we also have a Democrat who is our governor, and they were able to work together to make our primary a success. So I applaud them, and I applaud all who made that a success.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was absolutely a success. I think looking into November, we should have learned a lot from this election. We should be putting it to work in November. Unfortunately, that's a huge question mark right now. So Michael Adams has not committed to working with the governor again for the general election. So we don't know what's going to happen. It took a pretty significant step using emergency powers to allow us to have that vote by mail. And it's going to take
because
leadership
that was
to make
against
that
what
happen.
he wanted to do. So that was
we're going to do that.
Was not what he wanted to do when he ran for office. Actually, he was against that. So it took the COVID-19 to make it happen. So, and there won't be a vaccine by November. So hopefully our leaders can work together to make it a safe election for all of us.
Yep. And if you didn't do it last week, we shared a number of times in the chat the link to go to the Secretary of State's website and let him know that we appreciate the work that happened for the primary and that needs to be done again for the general election. So yeah, we can share that again in the chat. Please do take advantage of it. Feed his ego. These guys like to be congratulated for doing things well, and don't call him Mitch's minion yet.
Just say thank you. How about that? He did a great job. And you all, let's give thanks where it's due.
Credit where it's due.
He did a great job. And just all you have to do is just say thank you and keep it up.
Yep. And then if he backslides and says he's not going to provide vote by mail for November, then we hit him really hard. But right now, let's take him at his word, and that he wants more people voting and wants them to do it safely. And of course, we figured out a pretty good way to do that. We'll need to revise it somewhat, but I think we'll be able to. So, all right. And then Nate, final thoughts from you.
Just a little announcement that next week we are finally going to be able to debut the song and video that I've been working on.
What?
Yes. So if you don't come for Yarmuth, come for the song.
Yeah, that is, man, you do not want to miss next week's Moscow Mitch Monday. We have got an original NATO song is going to be shared with us. We got Chairman John Yarmuth. Man, Aftyn, if you want to come back, just hold on to that Zoom link. Just pop in at any time. At any rate, so hey, one I did want to mention and say thanks to Ken and Couchfire Media for helping us make the live stream look better. I don't know what it looks like now because I have no control over anything. After doing it for a couple of months of actually putting all the images up myself, I was the reason we had a different technical difficulty every week. Almost always my fault. But now we can blame Ken. Isn't that exciting? And it's going to look a lot better because he actually does know what he's doing. So I'm excited to rewatch this later and see what it looks like. But I do know that we've got some closing credits for the first time. That's kind of exciting. And you can see who's who and what's what. We'll share that information as we take it out. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to take it out.